Welcome to the Politicrat. I'm Omar Moore. It is Friday, September the 4th, 2020. On this episode of the Politicrat, values, decency. What do those things mean to you? What do values mean to you? Are you a single issue voter? What does that mean? A single issue voter. It would appear to be obvious, but perhaps not so much. A few thoughts about those subjects and ideas coming up next. Welcome back. What is a single issue voter? I mean, is there such a thing? I know there is such a thing. But what exactly does that really mean? Somebody who votes for someone solely upon one particular issue that they, the voter, may agree with the candidate upon. And since that candidate espouses that view that happens to be the view of the voter, and that issue that the voter is in league with the candidate on is the thing they feel strongly about, perhaps, then regardless of what else the candidate says, as long as the candidate espouses this view that the voter has, and perhaps obviously feels, I think, quite strongly about, then the voter will vote for the candidate, regardless of where she stands on everything else. There is a thing like that. It is a thing in the world, in the universe. But it also seems somewhat mythical to me. In some senses, I sit here and I think that there isn't such a thing as a single issue voter because that is a mythical thing, in my view, in some ways. Really? You only care about one thing? Your whole existence to engage in the process of voting hinges upon one issue in the entire world? Even if you're someone who, and I hope we all are, although some of us may not be, someone who espouses the idea and the view that we have to be kinder to this planet. We have to look at the environment, which is rapidly declining through global warming. And we have to look at trying to slow that down somehow, even though that is becoming impossible. But that we can at least do things in our everyday lives on a very simple basis to slow down the effects of global warming, climate change. The global warming that causes this, and our neglect of the planet that causes what we're seeing. Excessive amounts of wildfires and mudslides and floods and storms. We've seen them here in the United States over the last few weeks, in the Midwest and the South. The hurricanes that have hit the last, what has it been, 3 or 4 hurricanes? And I know it's hurricane season, but 3 or 4 hurricanes we've had in the last month or two. And there's never any discussion about the things that are causing a lot of these hurricanes. Never any conversation in the corporate news media. But even as we are, many of us, in support of the planet and trying to extend its life and trying to slow down the effects, the devastating effects of what we as human beings are doing to this planet, surely we have other issues that we would also vote on. I think a lot of, and I could be wrong, but I suspect that if you're looking at these political parties, because there are some political parties who aren't the two main parties, who do run on one issue, who do have a platform for one thing. But I suspect if you had to pick a party where you would see somebody voting on one thing, I would tend to believe it would be the Republicans. And I say that because in 1994, we can go back way before then, but I'm going to pick 1994, the early 1990s, and into the early 2000s, actually, the early 2000s as well. But in the 1990s, there were initiatives being put on the ballot in many states that dealt with the idea of, should there be two people of the same sex getting married? We saw that here, for an example, that I bring to mind in California in 2008, where there was this evil thing called Proposition 8. And I can say I proudly voted against Proposition 8, which was a proposition here in California that forbade people of the same sex from marrying. That said that if there are two men who are in love, they can't get married in the state of California. And I proudly voted against that proposition. The bad news is that most of California did not. And because most of California did not vote against it, that became something that was law. So that you could not, if you were a woman and you loved another woman and you wanted to make a life together, you couldn't have that formally recognized by the state in California. You could not formally have that. Of course, the Supreme Court put paid to all of that in 2015 with the Oger-Bethel decision. And I'm happy for that, because I don't want to live in a society where two adults cannot get married. I don't want to really be in a society like that. I mean, I want to live. I'm not saying that I don't want to live. But what I am saying is that I don't really feel great, shall we say, feel good, shall we say, about a society that does not allow two women to marry each other or two men to marry each other. That is a human right. People should be able to express love for each other. Two consenting adults should be allowed to do that. And if those two consenting adults wish to be married, then they should be able to be married. I mean, it's really that simple. After a while, there is no controversy there at all. If two adults, no matter who they are, wish to be married, then no law, no state, no apparatus of any kind should be encroaching upon that. And finally, the United States Supreme Court, as I mentioned, said in 2015 that, nothing is going to get in the way of this. And there's so many unhappy couples so many unhappily married couples. I mean, look at the couple in the White House. I mean, how many times have we seen Melania Trump give a death stare to her husband? How many times have we seen Melania Trump slap her husband's hand away when his grubby little orange hands dare to make contact with her hands? I mean, look, Melania hates her husband's guts. And she herself is a loathsome figure as well. Just ask Stephanie Wolkoff, who wrote a book called Melania and Me, which was just released this week. She said that she wished she had never been her friend. She says she wished that she had never met Melania Trump. Melania Trump is a racist, just like her husband is. And again, she hates his guts. Who wants to get into all of the minutiae here? But they're a public couple who are doing so much damage to this country and to the planet. So, I mean, people who want to be married should be married. Who are adults, they should get married. Adults, consenting adults. As simple as that. But you see, that's an example of a single issue, right? A proposition that some group, hateful group, whether they're conservative or Republican or what, they're a group that hates people, a group that has contempt for people who want to get married to people of the same sex as they. And the hatred and the fear and the paranoia of those who would draw up a proposition in this state or any other and put that on the ballot, and put it on the ballot during a general election year, is done purely on a very cynical basis, but also in the hopes that people pay attention to, oh, there's something on the ballot. Do I want people who are gay or trans to get married? Oh, no, I'm going to just say no to that. That's what people said here in California. The so-called enlightened state. We are the most forward-thinking state. We are the most progressive state. We are the state that leads the way. We are the ones who go first, and everyone follows us when we make that move and genuflect to the future with an eye on the absolute idea that when we are first, we are trailblazers. We trailblaze the way forward. By the way, forward is the... if I'm not mistaken, forward is the actual motto for Wisconsin. That is the state's motto, forward. The word forward, F-O-R-W-A-R-D, that is the motto for Wisconsin. And California takes that idea of blazing a trail. And this Proposition 8 was one of the great shames, among many great shames in this state. Much less the Mexicans having their land taken from them. I mean, stolen from them by brute force and murder. Because California is Mexican, by the way. Can we just get that right? The Mexican, this is Mexican land that we're sitting on here in California. Can we put that on the table? And one of the other shames is this Proposition 8. People have already forgotten Proposition 8. Well, some people haven't. But most people have moved on and forgotten about Proposition 8. And that was only 12 years ago. And I remember that was the year 2008 when Barack Obama became the first African-American president, the first black president in the history of the United States of America. And yet there were people in this state of California voting against the idea and voting against having gay people marry each other, having people of the same sex marry each other. That was voted against by a majority of people just 12 years ago in this state. Anita Bryant lives on, or at least she did live on in that way, right? I mean, Anita Bryant, if you don't know anything about Anita Bryant was someone who was vigorously against the idea of gay people marrying. I mean, she absolutely, I think she, quite frankly, was not, obviously she was homophobic. I mean, that, and by the way, Anita Bryant is still here with us. I mean, I could be getting the name wrong here because there's another Anita Bryant. There is, actually, she's still here. It's the same Anita Bryant. You know, do you know that she was she had won a beauty pageant once? Did you know that about Anita Bryant? She did these commercials. I seem to remember, was it in the 70s? I think she did these commercials for orange juice or citrus or something as well. I don't know. You can go look all that up. And she sang. That Anita Bryant. I mean, if Margaret Court was an example in Australia to outright bigotry against people who are gay, against human beings, fellow human beings, right? If Margaret Court, who also is still here with us, was an ambassador to bigotry and hatred of gay people, then that is what Anita Bryant is right now to gay people. She's still, I'm sure, I mean, you don't hear from her much these days, but yeah, she was so vigorously against. I cannot tell you, Anita Bryant was one of the most heinous people. And again, she is still alive. She is still here with us. One of the most heinous people on this planet when it came to her attacks on gay people. I mean, she ran these vicious campaigns, especially in the 70s. This is an era, the 70s, where we just come out of, we had Woodstock. We had just come out of Woodstock. I mean, the music festival. And anyway, she was just awful. I mean, she, just really reprehensible figure in my view. She was such I don't know what she's doing today, but was such a bigot. And this is the thing. I mean, she got, I mean, the response to her was such that people were throwing pies at her. This is a single issue person, right? Anita Bryant is the example of a single issue person. She had these ordinances and tried to have these campaigns, just like Proposition 8. She would have given full-throated support to that if she didn't already. And some of the things she would say about people, the fear, the bigotry, the hatred that was spewing from Anita Bryant, and not only Anita Bryant, she's not the only one. I mean, when I say she's not the only one, you had a lot of people who were supporting who were agreeing with her. You had people, she's here in California and down in Orange County or wherever, and Florida, and, she was just something else. And she's still here again, but in those days, And she had a lot of sympathy. She had a lot of support. And a lot of opposition. Harvey Milk was one of the people who opposed her. But the reason I bring up the Anita Bryant story and the example there is that someone like that is the example of a single issue person. They put something on a ballot, they try to get signatures approved for it, and you see these things here in California and elsewhere in the country, propositions or initiatives that are on the ballot every year. And there's some in Colorado this coming November, and in every state there are these things. And Karl Rove and others in the 90s and in the early 2000s would put these kinds of very toxic and poisonous, fear-based, hate-based propositions and initiatives on the ballot. And they'd be put on the ballot next to the presidential race or next to a big Senate race, designed to provoke people to turn out to vote. I mean, that's what that was. It was to, in my view, also to turn out a voting base in the Republican Party. So what are we going to do? We're going to throw red meat to people who hate. We're going to throw red meat in the Republican Party to people who hate. And the way we're going to do that is to have a ballot initiative about whether or not you think that those two people over there, those two women over there, should be able to get married in our state or not. And that's really the genesis of this. It's to push out turnout. It's to turn up the volume on turnout. I mean, that's what all of this is about. And it's about hatred. It's about making sure that these good Christian family values get upheld. Oh, family values, oh my goodness. Talk about family values, Jerry Falwell Jr. How about that for family values? Good Lord. Anita Bryant, my goodness me. You see, this is the thing. Single issue voters to me are hate voters. Because you can't tell me that you care about nothing else and you're going to leave your whole ballot empty except for this one issue. This one issue in an election year. Whether it's a midterm election, whether it is a general election, you're going to tell me that the only thing you're going to vote for or vote on is guns? Is whether or not two people who are of the same sex should get married? Huh? Really? You're going to hear a clip from a press conference held by Anita Bryant in 1977. Now, again, remember that, as I said, she is an anti-gay activist. She's still around, as I mentioned before. And people, you have to watch this on YouTube. But listen to this. Someone is going to, as she talks all of this hatred against gay people, someone is going to come up to her and literally put a pie in her face. Listen to this.
Because if you don't flaunt it, who's going to know you're homosexual or not, you see? What they wanted to do was to flaunt it and to not lose their jobs because of it. if we were going to go on a crusade across the nation and try to do away with the homosexuals, then we certainly would have done it on June the 8th after one of the most overwhelming victories in the country. But we didn't. We tried to avoid it and went into a place called Norfolk, Virginia, and were met with protest and all kinds of problems. And
Security agent.
No, let him stay.
No.
Let him stay.
Well, at least it's a fruit pie.
Let's pray for him right now. Anita, let's pray. Anita, why don't you pray? That's all right.
Father, we want to thank you for the opportunity of coming to Des Moines. And Father, I want to ask that you forgive him.
That we love him.
And that we love him. And that we're praying for him to be delivered from his deviant lifestyle, Father. And I just...
We forgive you, and we love you.
Thank you. Could we ask you to leave?
I don't want this man touched or harmed in any way.
I'll leave. All right, I don't mind.
You have done your cause more harm.
Thus always to bigots.
Do you know who's here?
Thus always to
You know
bigots.
who saw you do
We
that?
welcome you to the Midwest. We hope you come back.
Do you know who saw you do
We
that?
love you as a person.
This man is from Rolling Stone magazine.
We love
Do you know
as a
what kind of
person,
publicity
Anita.
you're gonna
We
get?
can't stand the garbage you spout.
Leave him alone. Do not touch him.
Yes, I certainly think so. It's not bad.
That is remarkable. That is remarkable. That was from 1977 at a press conference in Des Moines, Iowa. Anita Bryant, who isn't, I mean, she's still around. She's still here. Vigorous anti-gay activist. And you heard the hatred there. You have to watch that on YouTube. Praying for someone to be recovered from their deviant lifestyle. I mean, incredible. And you heard the man who threw the pie say that we love you as a person, Anita, but we can't stand this bile, this hatred that you are spewing. And that's exactly what she was spewing at that press conference and what she did all across the country. I mean, she's actually based out of Florida, but you know, she played a role in California. A lot of the stuff she did out here and elsewhere. I mean, this campaign of hate, which is what it is. It's a campaign of hate, and it's pure hatred. And she said, you heard her, if we wanted to get rid of the homosexuals, we would have certainly done it after the victory in June. I mean, this stuff, we've got to keep on top of this stuff and drive it back underground. Because, as Joe Biden has said, this stuff doesn't go away, it just hides. Anita Bryant, 1977. How about that? Welcome back. So that's really what single issue voting is, right? This idea that it's really hate voting. I mean, not in every single case, because there are people who may be voting on something that does not involve the hatred of someone or something, or a group or another. That they may actually be voting on something that they do hold very dear. But the idea that when you're voting for a candidate, that you're only voting for that person because of one issue that they stand for that the other candidate does not stand for, and there's nothing else about the person you're voting for that is of any interest or alignment to your votes, then what is that? That makes no sense. I've never met someone like this. Have you ever met someone like this? Do you know any person who is a single issue voter, that the only thing they vote for is this one issue that a candidate supports, and no matter what positions that candidate takes the rest of the time, you don't care about those things, even if some of those things may be abhorrent to most, if not all, of the rest of us, or to you even, and you're not going to look at those things? Are you really telling me that you are going to overlook all of those other things about someone? You're going to put the blinders on and then go, Eureka! That's the one issue she stands for. And that's the issue that I care about. I don't care about anything else. That's not reality. Are you a single issue voter? Are you? I've never been a single issue voter. And I don't know if anyone listening to me ever has. I don't know if anyone who is listening to me right now knows of someone who is a single issue voter, who only votes on one thing that a candidate supports, that they support, and the rest of the candidate's platform or the party's platform they don't care about, no matter what it is. Boiling chimpanzees, and that's a horrible example, but you know what I mean, really? There is no such thing really as a single issue candidate. I mean, there may be a party platform that candidate runs that might be narrowly tailored to a few things. And the party itself, well, it may call itself the Green Party or the monster raving loony party. You know, that party in England, the monster raving loonies, who've been around for 30, 40 years. They stand for all kinds of things. Even they stand for more than one issue, right? If you know anything about politics in the UK, and I'm from the UK, and I remember in the 70s and 80s, the monster raving loony party, they're still around. And they're still having a good time in their eye-catching outfits, and, people dressed up in oversized hats and, oversized glasses and these big super large boots. And I mean, watch the next elections in the UK and watch when they have the count of who is going to win, and the alderman, whomever that might be, reads out the vote tally, and they all the candidates are standing there. So if it's in a particular borough, a particular parish, a particular town in England, for example, you'll have the 5 or 6 candidates standing there next to each other. 5 of them will be in business attire, and the one person, if that person is someone from the monster raving loony party, is going to be standing there in a clown outfit or something even more original than that. And they will get between 600 to 1,000 votes. You can count on it. They'll get actually between 200 and 1,000 votes in every single race that they run. But even their platform is not a single issue platform. They aren't. I mean, they are not a single issue group. There isn't a single issue candidate. I mean, there are candidates, racists like George Wallace, who have a mantra about them. Right? So George Wallace's mantra and his action when he was governor of the state of Alabama, and then of course he ran for president. People forget this. He ran for president in some people forget this, not everybody. But people when I say people forget, I mean that the culture and there are people who forget this in the culture of the way this country politically has gone and traveled over the last 50, 60, 70 years. Within that, Few people, or some people, do not remember, I shouldn't say few, some people do not remember that George Wallace, the racist and segregationist, ran for president. And by the way, did not do horribly. He got about 13 to 14 to 15 around percent of a vote, around there, 14, 15, 16% in that area. Not terrible for a third party candidate. And maybe that's the reason why Nixon and Hubert Humphrey were literally a percentage point from each other. Nixon won that race in a squeaker. And who knows what would have happened if Wallace had not, picked up 14% of the vote, 15%, 13%, 17%. It's in the teens. That's a sizable chunk of vote. Now his mantra was, and again, when he was governor, segregation now, so you've heard it, you know the mantra. But that wasn't the only issue. I mean, it's primarily his issue, but there were others. Can't remember all his positions. But I do think that Republicans do have this history of putting up these kinds of ballot initiatives that tell you that you really, you'll be terrified. I mean, we're seeing this now with Trump. The suburbs are going to be taken over. I mean, he doesn't stand for anything. He doesn't stand for anything except himself. He has no ideology. So he's not even a single issue candidate. He is just an id. Donald Trump is pure id. And that is his campaign. Feed me, feed me, feed me. I'm a malignant narcissist. That is Donald Trump's campaign. It's been his campaign all his life. Which brings me to this topic of values. What are your values? What is it that you believe in? For example, let me just say this. I believe that everyone should treat each other with respect and should recognize each other's humanity and should treat people the way they would like themselves to be treated. That's a value. That's a value of compassion and decency and humanity, and embracing the idea that we should treat each other well, because that's an extension of our own humanity, an extension of our own sense of decency to each other. So that's a value that speaks to decency, that speaks to moral sanity, right? I mean, that's a value, right? That's a value. You believe that education is something that should be given the maximum attention of any subject matter, for example, and that education is the realm of the coin. Information, as Randy Rhoads would say to you, is the realm of the coin. You believe that being able to teach somebody, to educate someone, to nourish their lives with information, with history, with a sense of purpose, that's an extension of your values, your value system. What are your values? I believe that values are fundamentally held things. That's what values are to me. And those are things that we then predicate policy upon. And one of the things I think is a mistake made by too many political candidates, people running for office, too many politicians, is that they talk about policy without first talking about values. And actually, Senator Elizabeth Warren, when she was running, cited this very same thing. That you really have to talk about values before you even get to the policy, because policy is founded upon values, and without values, you don't have any real policy. Or if you have a policy, it's a policy of complete and utter chaos and disorder, which is exactly what you have right now in the White House. Chaos, death, and disorder. An example of the death, of course, is 187,000 plus people who have died from coronavirus because Donald Trump did nothing to address the crisis that was going on in this pandemic and still goes on right now. And he did not give ventilators to governors until weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks later. And when he gave those ventilators to people like Governor Gavin Newsom out here in California, all the ventilators were broken and they had to get fixed. More people died in the process. PPE was not being sent to people who needed it in the medical field, in hospitals. People died. You know, we have about 1,000, if not more, nurses and doctors who've died in this country here in the U.S. Did you know that? It's hardly ever being reported at all. I've not heard it be reported. Maybe I'm underestimating that figure. It could be a lot higher than 1,000. You know, we've had a lot of deaths of police officers. At least 1,100 or more, 1,300 or more police have died. More than 1,200 or whatever it is, police officers have died this year from coronavirus here in the U.S. Did you know that? True story. True story. I mean, values. What are our values? One of the values is that everybody should have a roof over their heads, because we need to make sure that everyone who is living has a right to live, and has a right to live comfortably. And a right to live comfortably means having a roof over one's head and being able to not just survive, but to live, to be fed, to be clothed, to have a place to sleep. And the value there is providing for people so that they can live a life that is not lived in inhumane or abject poverty. We want to remove an end policy, and the way you do that is by eradicating the harms of capitalism, or at least toxic capitalism. And many people, after hearing what I've just said, will say, well, look, all capitalism is bad and all of it's toxic. And yeah, I mean, to much the degree, I would agree with that. But I think it's how we use capitalism, how we engage in that. Can we possibly reframe the use of capitalism? Can there be a different kind of capitalism? Maybe, maybe not. Milton Friedman's way is definitely not the way I would go, but that's the way we've been forever, for a good many decades now. That toxic capitalism, or that capitalism that says, you know what, let the marketplace take care of all of this. We know what we're doing here in the marketplace. We should be unrestrained in our capitalistic fervor. And everyone else will benefit from our gazillion dollars of money making. It will trickle down, trickle down, trickle down to you folk on the bottom. But we'll have stolen all the money before it trickles down. That's the trickle-down economics that Reagan loved so much. The voodoo economics. And his running mate, George W. Bush, when they were competing for the nomination in 1980, famously cited that about his opponent. It was a losing strategy, but it was the truth. Voodoo economics. And look where that landed us 40 years later. Look at that. Take a goddamn look at that, huh? Oh, God. Yeah, capitalism is poisonous, by the way. I mean, it has wrecked and destroyed this land and many other lands beyond. And that doesn't mean that because I say capitalism is toxic, that I'm not in favor of a bartered system or I'm not in favor of money and currency. Of course I'm in favor of those things. But it's how we associate and ascribe and transact with those things that I have the big problem with. And that is part of the capitalistic ethos that has absolutely wrecked us. That's a value, right? That's a value system, isn't it? And that value system is a dangerous one. That's a value system that is strictly transactional, a la Donald Trump, who looks at everybody as a commodity to be bartered with. It goes back to these comments that were released in the Atlantic magazine. It's online now. Jeffrey Goldberg wrote the story. It came out yesterday. And everybody reacted to it, including myself. I tweeted about it on my Twitter page at the Popcorn REEL. And it's reprehensible what he said, what Trump said about Americans or anybody. But in this case, since it's here in America, Americans who put their lives on the line in tours of duty in Iraq or Afghanistan or wherever they are around the world, bravely fighting for a value system, right? This ideal or idea that America supposedly stands for. And it was part of the patriotic duty of those who have served, and many of whom have sacrificed their lives or their limbs to that ideal, and doing so in service of a government that asks them to do their duty for country. And now you've got a bone spur coward, bleach drinking punk who is now slandering the people who sacrifice, slandering their service, calling out John McCain and saying nasty things about him, saying nasty things about him after he's passed away, saying nasty things about another guy who served his country, John Dingell. He said things about him last year. Well, I'm sure he's looking up at us right now. I mean, this is the kind, and then saying the things he said in the Atlantic article. Whoa, why did he do that? He said this about LaDavid Johnson. People have already forgotten 3 years ago. He said to the widow of LaDavid Johnson, Maisha Johnson, well, I may have told this story before. Her husband, LaDavid, had been killed in an ambush along with three or four other U.S. soldiers, U.S. personnel, military in Niger on the African continent, and they were ambushed. They were killed. And so Donald Trump called her, Maisha Johnson, and said to her, well, he knew what he was signing up for. Come on. Come on, folks. I have told this story before. 2017, that happened. And Trump couldn't even remember LaDavid's name. Couldn't even remember. I mean, look, these guys get the names. The people who are orchestrating the call and setting it up, they are the ones who supply the names. Oh, here's the person you're about to talk to is so-and-so, and she or he lost their spouse, and the spouse's name was so-and-so. You can't tell me that you forget that unless you deliberately do that, unless you refuse to say the name of Jacob Blake, unless you deliberately do that. But even with all of the horrible things that Donald Trump has said, he is reflecting a certain truth about the contempt America has long had for black and brown and native peoples. And that contempt is not only shown in the deeds and the words, it's also shown in the iconography and the culture. The denigration of Native Americans through sports teams and franchises who have this horribly racist, just incredibly destructive and racist symbol and symbolism of Native Americans. Sports teams being called derogatory things. And only until a few months ago did Washington see fit to drop that racist name. People dressing up in all this sacred dress from Native America. And I don't even know if that was sacred dress to them. I don't know. But people dressing in very, that reflects a certain level of value system too, that you do not care. And you're walking around with the head of a Native American as part of your sports logo. That's your logo in 2020. And you buy that shirt from that NHL team and you don't look at that and you don't think, something doesn't wash over you, something doesn't come to you, something doesn't click in your own sense of humanity. Do you not feel something that, ooh, this is a little weird? There's nothing that all that registers? If that logo was instead a logo of some white male on the front of it, would that make a difference? Maybe it wouldn't. And that person was being depicted on that shirt or jersey in a certain way. Would that make a difference? Maybe it wouldn't to some of the people who wear these obscene, racist things. I guess it wouldn't be the same, would it? I mean, you really would get different reactions, I think. But that's a value system. There's a franchise who has calculated that the value is, I don't know. The value system for them is making money. By hook or crook or anything else. So that's my issue. I mean, that word values, what are your values? And I think that we have to start treating people with compassion again. We've got so far away from that. Look at all of the homeless people that we have in the United States. And look at all the wealth that we have here in the United States. And if you want a poster child, if you want a poster boy for just how much of a problem we do have in this country with disparate income, with a wildly, sharply stark difference and a chasm between rich and poor, look no further than here in San Francisco, California, my friends. You've got some of the richest people on earth here in this city, in the state of California overall. While literally down the street or literally down the way or literally, across a very Spartan building, an incredible building, you've got a homeless person lying there, 5 homeless people without a roof, or as they are called, houseless, how some homeless people like to be identified as houseless. Because homelessness implies, I guess, that you do not belong at all. You have no home. You have no belonging. Houseless is more accurate because it simply means that you are not living inside a house. You are not living with a roof over your head, even if that roof's an apartment. It's a house, right? It's an apartment. I guess that's the concept of home, but the same difference. I mean, obviously a house and an apartment are obviously 2 different things. I get that. But it is that people have not been cared for because they have been thrown out whatever their circumstance, and nobody in government has sought fit to help them, see them as human beings and help them on their feet, which is what they do in Denmark, which is what they do in Sweden, which is what they do in a number of Scandinavian countries and beyond in other parts of the world as well. And they actually treat people with a level of respect and humanity that we just do not do here in this country. We just don't. We discard the elderly. We turn our backs on women who've turned 40 or 35 in some cases. That's not everybody. I'm just saying the culture that we live in. So that someone who is smart and talented gets turned out at 35. No more film roles for you. You're no longer bankable. You're no longer a star. We need to get the new kid on the street, so to speak. But it happens. This is real. I'm not making this up. It's not a gimmick. It's what's happened, right? You'll have 7 women in the Hollywood industry, for example, who will have bust through that mold of being of a certain age and have thrived, right? You got the Helen Mirren and Judi Dench and Meryl Streep and Susan Sarandon and one or two others. But most everybody else is 50 or under, and or thereabouts. And even that is okay for people. I mean, they can live with that. But we are such an age-conscious place as well. But I digress a bit. Because ultimately, no matter what this clown in the White House says, we have to also examine our values. What our values are. I think that's really a key. It's easy to throw the proverbial fireballs at Donald Trump, and he certainly deserves them, and our criticism of the behavior that he has done and the damage he has done to this country. But we also should be examining ourselves, because we are the society that walks by the homeless every day, or the houseless. We walk past the people on the street, shall I say, daily, without a thought. We barely look at them. We barely make eye contact with them. That's a value we've chosen, or at least I shouldn't keep using the word because there may be some contextual differences. But we have chosen to turn our back on people who are less fortunate. Many of us have. Some of us have not. Someone will say hello and then we'll walk past. We won't even acknowledge them. We won't even respond. Why? It's like Dr. King when he said, the question is not what will happen to me if I don't give the beggar money or if I don't help him. The question is, what will happen to the beggar? I mean, again, it's this question. It's not a question of what will happen to me if I give this beggar money. No. That's what Dr. King said. The question is, what will happen to the beggar if I don't give him money or give her money? That's the key. And that has something to do with values. That has something to do with your character. That has something to do with how you see the world and how you see other human beings. And if you're Donald Trump, then you see everybody as a commodity and a thing. Something that's not real, something that's an inanimate object. That's how you see humanity, as things to be crushed, defeated, and dominated, and bartered and traded. It sounds very much like enslavement, quite frankly. And that's what happens when you have an upbringing where your father is telling you to not do anything that makes you look weak and makes you look this and makes you look that, and has you turning against other family members. I mean, that's really what that's all about. Values are very important, and I think we have to start examining our souls as well as examining the direction of the country. We talk about the soul of the nation. Joe Biden talks about it even. But we've got to examine what that soul is. What is the soul of our nation? I mean, I know it ain't apple pie, and it ain't George Washington cannot tell a lie. That is not the soul of our nation. Because George Washington owned black people as property. Owning human beings as property. While he was in the White House. And he and 14 or 15 other American presidents did just the same. The first 15 out of 16 of them, at least, owned black people as property. So that should tell you something. Native American land and Native Americans being genocided. And now, in the last 50, 60 years, you've got some NHL team with these very offensive logos of Native Americans on their jersey. Wow, how tone deaf and how vacant and hateful and inhumane. I mean, that's just inhumanity as well. Not just, but that is inhumane. When you fail to recognize someone else in the world as someone who is human, then it gives you the license, I guess, to treat them with maximum disdain. Think about your choice for this coming November. In fact, hopefully you're going to be voting this month because there are states that are. Wisconsin, Virginia, Vermont, Minnesota. Those are among the states that are voting this month, early voting. This month, in fact, 2 weeks from today, Friday, September the 18th, you will be able to vote in those states that I just mentioned. And today in North Carolina, ballots are being mailed to every single voter in the state of North Carolina. So now is the time to start thinking about your vote and voting. And we must vote early. And it's got to be done early. And of course, once. It's incredible that you even have to say that. Everybody knows that you're supposed to vote once. Everybody knows that voting twice will send you to jail. It's illegal. It's against the law. And that someone in the White House actually says, vote twice. Oh, well, vote once and then go to check and see and vote again. Unbelievable, but not unbelievable at all. This is who this guy's been for 50 plus years. And by the way, if you have values that say that everybody should be able to live and be recognized and their humanity respected and recognized, then you know you have to vote for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. If you are someone who is of the opposite view and thinks, screw the world, and that you have this hate and bile within you, bubbling, then you know that you'll vote for Donald Trump in that regard. Because that's who he is. He's empty. I think we can, and I put quotes around the word can, do better. But we haven't so far. And I do cringe when politicians say this is not who we are. Because if you look at 400 plus years, it is who we are. So the appropriate condemnation of Donald Trump around these comments about people who died in the military are well understood, and I support them, and I agree, I condemn him as well. But that only goes so far. Certainly, it only goes so far if we fail to then look at the country at large. 63 million people voted for this guy, knowing what they know, what he's said, what he's done. They knew that he said grab a woman. They know that, right? They know that he's said racist things and done things that are racist toward black people. Putting up ads at Central Park, the Exonerated Five, and Bring back the death penalty. I mean, come on. They know that. They voted for that. So that says something about the country at large too, right? That says something about at least 63 million people. In fact, it says something about a whole country, a culture of a country that discards the homeless, that discards their houses, that discards people on health care. That has millions of people getting ready to be evicted. And there is no safety net for them anywhere. You've got senators running off to vacation, the do-nothing Republican Senate that runs off to vacation and doesn't negotiate for more stimulus bills. Vote the lot of these Republicans out. Hello. Down the ballot. I mean, it's easy to talk about Biden versus Trump, but you've got to start looking at the whole ballot, right down to dog catcher. Come on, it's just elementary, my dear Watson. Sherlock Holmes would know. I mean, your second stimulus check didn't come, did it? That didn't come for you. These guys went on vacation, and then when the Democrats had the nerve to ask for $600 on top of the unemployment benefits, you had 3 Republican senators, did you not forget, on the Senate floor arguing against it. Lindsey Graham, who's running against Jamie Harrison, the Democrat down there in South Carolina, for the Senate seat that Graham currently owns at the moment, has. That guy was up there arguing against why you, or people you know, shouldn't be getting an extra $600. True story. It's on C-SPAN. It's on YouTube. I watched these debates on the House floor and the Senate floor. I watched them with my own 2 eyes. So this is more than about Donald Trump. This is about a country that voted for him. 63 million people did. With everything else we know, I get it. But 63 million people, it shouldn't have been close. Hillary Clinton should have won that popular vote, not by 3 million, but by 33 million. It shouldn't even ever have to have been that close. I'm not going to go rehash 2016 because I've done it on Twitter as recently as yesterday when someone says something on television that is just profoundly uninformed by the realities of that campaign that Hillary Clinton ran, or that her strategist ran into the ground, shall we be more accurate to say. But value systems are important, and the value systems that we have must be defined. I would like to see Joe Biden talk about that a bit more. I think Kamala Harris has talked about it on her own campaign. But I would like to see her talk about it more here too. The choice is pretty simple, folks. I think it's pretty simple. Early vote. I've got the whole kit and caboodle list of 50 states plus DC and the deadlines and the vote early dates and everything else. And I'm constantly updating it, or at least once every day. So please make sure you do look at that. I am going to put that link again in the liner notes for this episode. Joe Biden visited Wisconsin yesterday and did it with a sense of class and respect for the humanity of Jacob Blake, who he spoke to, by the way, over the phone for 15 minutes and met with the Jacob Blake family as well. And it was closed to the media, which shows you that he isn't there for a photo op, unlike the guy in the White House. Compassion and empathy are important elements of our lives, of the human life. So let's return to more of that, more of those values, more of that, please. Because this country is in a sorry state of disrepair, and it's being disrespected, and it's disrespectful. The contours of the culture, and there are things in American culture that are good, but what we've got here now, anything but. So please, get out there, make sure you get people to vote, make sure you text people, make sure you email people, make sure you YouTube and you Facebook and Instagram and tweet people, and tell them to get out there and vote. An early vote, please. Thank you very much for listening to this edition of the politicrat. I'm Omar Moore.